Okay.
3, 2, 1. Start. Hi, everyone. Looks like people are starting to roll in now. So we'll get started in just a few minutes. Wait for some people to log on. It's so fun to see everyone roll in. Hi, Armin. Hi, Aruna. Delaney's here. Hi, Elodie, Eugene, Janine, Kim and Kimberly, Margarita, Marlon, Mary's here, Mindy, Paul, Peter, Robert, Sammy, Sharon, Vivian, Ted, Salin, Juana. Nice to see you all. Let's just give everyone a couple more seconds for everyone to join. And if you want to go ahead and type in the chat where you're dialing in from, that would be fun for folks to see. Peter says hi. Hello from Colorado, Los Angeles, Costa Mesa, sunny San Diego, I'm jealous. Phoenix, also jealous. Okay, looks like Seattle, looks like most folks are here. So let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to Swing's first ever speaker series. My name's Michelle Lacanina and I work in the marketing department at Swing. You'll probably recognize me from our quarterly town halls that I run. I am also the perpetrator of many emails to your inbox. I'm responsible for the newsletter and announcements on things like Elite Sub and the annual bonus and our some of our newer programs. So nice to meet you all. I want to say a couple things about the series before we get started. So this is a series that we've wanted to do for a while, and it's based on feedback that we've heard from our sub community. So you guys have told us over the years how much you value professional development. So we created this speaker series as a way to bring in veteran educators and other professionals in the field to talk to you guys and give you resources and advice that you can use immediately in the classroom. And you know, these are just going to be a series of events to help address some of the more pressing challenges in substitute teaching, especially now while we're still in the middle of a pandemic, things are extra challenging. So our goal here is to bring in speakers who can provide you with tips you can use right away. So before we get started, before I introduce our speaker, I'm going to drop a really quick poll because what I would love to know is what's the one thing you're hoping to get out of today? So what I will do is launch this poll in Zoom. You'll get a little pop-up and you can just choose from one of the choices. So what best describes the reason you're here today? Unfortunately, I had to design this poll as a multiple choice. I wanted to do write-in, but if you have something else to say that's not in this poll, what you can just do is write it in the Q&A window. And then when we get to the Q&A session, we can address your question. So starting to see answers. And it looks like most people are here to learn general strategies to apply while teaching. That feels great because that is what we're planning on doing today. So while people are finishing up the poll, let me just tell you a couple more things about this event. So this is a Zoom webinar. It's not a Zoom meeting. So what that means is, as you've seen, you are muted, you are not on camera, but you have free reign in the chat. If you have questions during the presentation along the way, type them in the Q&A window because that's where we'll be looking when we get to the Q&A. And just something to keep in mind is Zoom will record a transcript of the entire chat window. Zoom knows your email address and your name. So if there is something you don't want me or Zoom to know, just refrain from typing it in the chat. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and introduce our speaker. Okay, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Her name is Ms. Veronica Calvo. She is the Senior Manager of Partnerships for Inspire Learning and Teaching with National University. She's got over 18 years experience in the field of education and a master's in education. And she also taught Spanish in high school for 5 years. So she has been there on the ground with you. And we're going to be talking today about fostering positive interactions with students. And I'm excited that this is our first topic because this was the #1 topic when we surveyed you guys a couple of weeks ago and asked what you wanted to learn. So we're going to just get right to it. Veronica, welcome to the Swing Speaker Series.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for the conversation and hopefully give you some really great strategies that you can implement the very next time that you're in your sub assignments.
Okay, great. So before we get started on the topic, I'd like to hear a little bit more about you and your experience with helping teachers and students build positive relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I was a classroom teacher, but prior to that, I also did some subbing, and I was also a student teacher. So I was also that, you know, for the students, that stranger that comes into the class when their teacher is not there, you know, I'm supposed to go get through some lesson plans and get through the activities. You know, real quickly, I learned how much students can try to push your buttons, right, to see how far they can, you know, get away with different things. So fortunately, I do have, you know, friends and family who are in the education field who were able to give me some tips on what to be able to do in these types of situations. And I always remember that the first thing that they said is building those relationships with students, right? There's a book out there, and I can't remember the complete title, but it says, "Do not smile until December." Right? And it's one of those, I guess, false statements that sometimes we think that we need to do with our students. You know, we want to build relationships immediately, you know, day one when we step into the classroom with them, and not wait, you know, until later to do that. You know, we want to build relationships with students, but also build a positive classroom environment where students are feeling safe and valued in that, you know, environment.
Thanks for that. That was funny. Don't smile till December. So you've already kind of started to touch on the topic a little bit. But what I'd like to know is, what do you think is the most important positive outcome that students and substitute teachers will get out of learning some of these tactics?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, research has shown that, you know, building relationships with students has like this tremendous impact on their achievement in class and also the way that they behave. So creating those positive interactions with students, you know, means that the adult in the classroom, the educator, is taking the time to get to know the student. They're finding out about the student's interests, their passions, their strengths, and also their needs, right? Because everyone coming into the classroom has, you know, a backpack filled with many, many, many needs. And so getting to know the student is going to allow, you know, the educator in that classroom get to know them and get to help them with those needs. It's also very important to learn more about the student's culture and their family, because that also tends to, you know, bring about certain, you know, behaviors in a classroom. And so it's really important for the educator to really understand their student as a whole, and not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom. So if, you know, if you see them in the hallway, if you see them in the cafeteria, if you see them, I don't know, outside during recess time, it's important to, you know, go out there and talk to them, or even just to say hi. You know, we've come across situations where, you know, the whole day goes by and a student has not even been spoken to, has not, you know, an adult has not even said hello to them. And that can have a great impact on, you know, on their day, on their week, on their month. So it's very important to build that relationship so that the students can feel supported and that you as the educator in the classroom can have success in the classroom.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we're talking about building, not only making the students feel good, but building academic achievement And I mean, it sounds like it's just a win-win.
Exactly. And the learning goes both ways, right? The teacher, the educator in the classroom, the substitute teacher, they need to get to know their students in the classroom, but the students also want to learn about that adult in that classroom. So it goes both ways. They want to know about, what are your interests? Do we have things in common? What are some things like in sports and families, hobbies? One of the favorite things that my students love to talk about is food, right? In my classroom. And so what are some things that we have in common? But maybe what are some things that are different about us, but make us unique? And maybe we find something that is of interest and we can share that, opportunity. So it definitely is a both, two-way situation where the student should also learn about the teacher. You don't have to dive like super deep into like personal stuff, but let the students get to know you and who you are as well.
Do you think there's a difference between if you're a full-time teacher and you're with these students day in and day out versus you're a substitute teacher and you might be a one-day assignment, might be a 5-day assignment? What's the unique opportunity for a substitute?
Yeah, absolutely. As a substitute teacher, you may have one day in the classroom with the students, or you may have a class period, depending if you're at the middle school or high school level. So that could be a little bit hard, to try to build a relationship in 50 minutes, or in a day. But it can be done. A teacher who's there the entire time, full time, has, multiple days to kind of build that relationship with their students, right? But going into the class and introducing yourself, letting them know who you are and what you're here for. Number one being that you're there for them, that you are interested in helping them out with their academics, or anything that they may be going through too, right? So I think that that's something that it's unique to substitute teachers, but it's great because I also believe that substitute teachers bring a lot of talent. There's different skills that you all have as well, with a different you're going in and you're helping different kids at different levels. So you're coming in with a lot of expertise that can help and make such a strong impact for those students.
One of the things I liked about what you said is just going out to the playground and to the hall and saying hi. And that might be the first time that student has talked to an adult all day. And that's one thing you can do in a single day.
Absolutely.
I want to get to one more question to kind of warm ourselves up to this topic before we get to the nuts and bolts of it and start talking about the specific tips and tricks. But how has the pandemic changed how you think about these positive relationships? Like, what's different now than it was 18 or 20 months ago?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been such a challenging 18 months. Everything has changed, not just in the education field, right? But in everything, parents have had to adjust, students have had to adjust, teachers have had to adjust. There's been a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, and in some cases, there's been trauma, right? So that's very widespread as we've lived and continue to live through this pandemic. So now, it's my belief that now it's even more important to build those positive relationships with students. It's going to be very critical to help those students, because there's been plenty of months with stress and plenty of months that they've missed classroom instruction. Right? There's been a lot of unfinished learning. And so it's important for us to be able to build those relationships with our students, acknowledge these anxieties, this stress, possibly, the traumas that we've gone through, and be able to work through it, right? There's going to be a lot more happening in the coming months. Every day is a new day, and we're still, again, in this pandemic. So we want to make sure that our focus stays on our students, that we build those trusting relationships and connections with them. Some of them have not even been in school for, almost, 2 years. And so that's tough. That's tough when you don't have that interaction with your peers, with your teachers. So it's definitely very, very different. But I think the importance, again, of those positive relationships, the building trust, those interactions, is important. It's key. It's the number one.
Do you mind if I ask you a question that I didn't tell you about earlier? Because you just made me think of something. So we're hearing a lot in the press about, learning loss, and there's a lot of hand wringing and that kind of a thing. But what we're talking about here is positivity. And do you think, if I can ask this in a way that's not leading the witness, do you think that there's just as much value in keeping students from being anxious about learning loss than trying to get them caught up on the academics itself?
Yeah, I mean, I really do believe that, academics is important. I get that. But if we don't fix what's going on with us, if we don't take care of ourselves, and this goes for teachers too. My number one thing is also supporting those teachers too. If we're not fixing and helping ourselves out, our students out, with all of these things that they have gone through, all these challenges that they have gone through, the academics is just never going to get there, right?
Yeah.
If they're thinking about other things, what I have to deal when I go home, or maybe food insecurity, or all these other things that have come up, academics is not going to be in the forefront of anybody's mind. And so it's really important to talk about what has happened, and then continue with the day. But if you see that if a student is off on a day or 2 days, it's good to pull them aside and to ask how they're doing. I mean, as adults, don't we like it when people truly ask us, how we are doing? So I think we have to keep that in mind as well.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for letting me take you off script.
Yeah.
I want to get into some of the nuts and bolts, the specific tactics and strategies that subs can use. What would you say is the most important thing that any sub should be doing in the classroom?
Well, I think, the topic of this conversation is, having these positive interactions. So I'm going to continue to say that we have to build these relationships. We need to understand that not everything is going to go the way the teacher has planned, right? So there's a
so how do you get into the mindset, like before you get into the classroom, something's not going to go as planned, you get in there, like, what do you think your process looks like?
I mean, exactly, right? I mean, I think with teachers too, I mean, every time I put a lesson plan together, I said, okay, hopefully this is the way it goes. But if not, I'm going to have to adjust. So those are some tips, understand that not everything's going to go as planned, have a sense of humor. Kids in elementary all the way through high school, at the end of the day, they are kids, right? And they all have a sense of humor, and they look forward to that, just like as human beings. And then, let's look at opportunities where we can make the day enjoyable for everyone, right? For the students, for the sub, and even for that teacher who's not in the classroom, right? Because if everyone has a good day, when the teacher comes back, it's great, right? We don't have to reteach. We don't have to, deal with like misbehaviors that happened during that time that the teacher was out. So it's really a win-win, again, for everyone. But again, just, knowing that, to build those relationships with the students, I sometimes, when I was doing my own subbing, I thought that the students were like after me, like I was the one that was getting targeted. But it might not be that that case, it might be that they're targeting the actual day, right? Like, okay, they come in, they see that there's a sub, and that means, "Oh, I don't need to work today," right? Well,
Mhm,
that's not
mhm,
the case, right?
mhm.
You still have to work, but they have to feel um, motivated to work for you, right? And how do you get a student to be motivated to work? Well, that's in that they like you. And how do they like you is to get to know you and who you are, and then you also taking the time to getting to know them, making them feel valued.
Do you have like a bag of tricks that you use getting to know students?
I do.
How do you make
I
that happen?
I do. I kind of thought, some of these tricks that I used as well. But, an interest survey is something that you can easily get on Pinterest. And I did look up um, some of these surveys. So I do have a link to share if you would like
Right.
me to do that.
Mhm.
But these interest surveys, provide students with great ways to get to know them. It tells you, it gives you an opportunity to know what they like or dislike, maybe their thoughts or viewpoints on certain things, and it
Mhm,
allows you to build those connections.
mhm,
Um, then another one that I think is great is an entrance or an exit slip. And this is just where you pose a question. They take out a sheet of paper and you pose a question, either at the beginning of class or at the end of the day or the class period. And it allows the educator, the substitute teacher, to get immediate feedback from the students. So you can ask questions like, what are your interests? Or what are your learning styles? You can ask about feedback on your teaching, or
mm,
what worked that day for you or what didn't work, how
mhm,
how is your class working for them. And then you have comments right away where you can reflect and adjust as needed, whether you're going to go back the next day to that classroom or maybe you're going to go back to another classroom, and you can just kind of adjust.
mhm.
It's great to get that automatic feedback. And then the third tip that I kind of put together is, I come from an organization that promotes social emotional learning, and we have these great quick connection cards. And so these are cards that are available to you. Also, I have the link. It's no cost. They're online or on an app, and it provides discussions, and activities for opportunities to share, to think, to collaborate. And so some questions are, that you can talk with your students are, very simple, like what will your perfect day be like? And you could go a little bit deeper of like, what is something that you are thankful for, and how do you show that you are thankful for it? It's a little bit deeper in there. Or it could be, what have you done that made a difference in someone's life, right? So these are great quick connections where you can ask the students these questions, and get to know them, and then they can ask you the same questions back so they can get to know you too.
Mhm, mhm.
So really great resources that you can use as well.
Yeah, those are great questions. So we'll be sure to send those out. Don't feel like you have to like memorize this. But I do want to loop back to one thing you said that I thought was really interesting. You said when you first started subbing, I thought I was being attacked, but the students were really attacking the day. And I think what that points to is something that a lot of people forget, and not just like substitute teaching, but in any situation, like to detach, and it's not all about me. But I just want to call that out because I thought that was just because that comes up a lot, where you're concerned that the class is going to be rowdy, but I think it's really important to detach, and they're really not attacking you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. And a lot of times students are just trying to see how far they can get.
Mhm.
Or maybe they're just trying to show off to their
Yeah,
peers and
yeah,
things like
yeah.
that. So I don't really think that they're doing anything in a malicious way. But again, building those relationships with them and then having them like you and respect you,
Mhm.
both ways, right? The respect has to be mutual. Um, then they're going to be less likely to cause any trouble, right, in your class.
Mhm. I think one of the ways you show that respect is just by having a genuine interest in them, by asking them those questions that you suggested. I do want to ask a couple questions around equity, and this is going to get a little bit deeper, but we've gotten this question a few times from some of our teachers, and they've asked for guidance on how do you connect with students when it's pretty evident in a classroom that there's great income disparity, whether it's in the classroom or the whole school. Do you have any advice on like what's different about this environment?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a secret that poverty, low income impacts a child's chances for success in school. So that's something that's been discussed over and over again. But it's important to acknowledge that children who are, low income or living in that poverty area, they do encounter a number of challenges compared to the other students who are on another level, right? um and so we need to acknowledge that as educators. We need to acknowledge that they are going to have a lot of challenges throughout their academic career, that they face a lot of emotional and social instability, that maybe because of this status that they're living in, unfortunately, their relationships with adults could be affected, right? So we have to acknowledge that as educators, for sure. And that's why, again, it's so important to build those strong and positive relationships with students, because that promotes then that trust and that cooperation between the student and the teacher. So then that's going to allow the students to be able to talk to the educator, the substitute teacher, on anything that is needed, on any support that they may need. But I also want to like mention that, when you do step into any classroom, whatever that classroom that is, we need to focus on all students, right? And so, we have, you can step into a classroom where, the class or the school is in a low income area, or you can go and step into a class where it's a wealthier area, or it's a mix, right? Where I taught, I had kids who were homeless, all the way to kids who were living in multi-million dollar homes. So there's that huge range. But it's really important to get to know all students, because even those who may have a background that's more on the wealthier side, they also have problems, right? Like I said earlier, the kids are coming in with a backpack full of issues. And so we want to make sure that we're there for our students, that we are supporting our students, that we recognize certain behaviors, where again, we can pull them aside and just have a conversation with them, because sometimes that's all that's needed. And that we're treating all students with respect and dignity, allowing for these positive interactions throughout the day.
Mhm. A backpack full of issues and everyone has one. I like that. It's kind of the great equalizer.
Yeah.
Just as a follow-up question, you kind of sort of already answered this, but a teacher asked us, what would you do if you sense that a student is struggling with something that's happening at home and they're not able to concentrate on school?
Yeah. Again, having that one-on-one conversation with the student, just asking, checking in on them, is always a great idea. But again, we have to realize that if they don't have that relationship with you, they may not feel comfortable, sharing those. So again, building trust and allowing opportunities for students to open up and share some of their struggles. It can take some time, but it can be done. If the educator, the adult, shows empathy, that's huge, and nurtures that relationship. Another tip could be, talking, if there's an opportunity to, connecting with the classroom teacher, or maybe someone within that department, so that they can give the substitute teacher some background information regarding the student, so that once the substitute teacher comes in, into the classroom, then they have some type of action plan when interacting with the student. So that's something that I definitely recommend. Use your resources in the school to help you with that. You don't think that this is something that you have to deal with on your own. You have school counselors, you have social workers, you have other peers, teachers that can help you in certain situations. So definitely don't do it alone, because it definitely takes a team. And that teacher who's in the classroom that you're helping also has these people as part of their team, helping that student.
Great. That's a great lesson. You are not alone.
Yes.
Now I want to switch just a little bit before we wrap up, and let's talk about self-care, because we've been talking a lot about students, but taking care of yourself as a sub. I mean, substitutes, teachers, school staff are also undergoing extra stressors because we are still in the middle of a pandemic and there are these extra challenges. So knowing that that's the case, that we're dealing with students who have had, who are in the middle of who have complex issues, what are some of the ways that substitute teachers can take care of themselves? So do you have any top self-care strategies that you recommend?
This is such a great topic.
Great.
I love this self-care, hashtag treat yourself situation, because it's so important. Sometimes we think that self-care could be maybe selfish, and it's not. The number one thing is that you need to be okay in order to give your very best to your students. And if you're not okay, and if you're anxious, and if you're stressed out, they will see that, and so that won't be a win-win for anybody. So making sure that you do take time for yourself, whether it's a small activity or a large activity. You can pack yourself a nice healthy lunch, or maybe something that you enjoy. And so when you have that lunchtime, you truly have that lunchtime, you walk away from anything, any responsibilities that you have, that you're focused on your meal, to maybe a mindfulness moment. If you're into meditation, or maybe doing, I used to, when I was living in San Diego, I used to love doing mindful walks, right? So no electronics, just kind of looking at the beauty of nature that we have all around. So that's something that I definitely do. Journaling is also great. There's different ways of journaling. You can write down some things that you're grateful for, so that, that can just kind of build that positive vibe within you. But there's also, if you're artistic, you can journal by drawing, which is also another way to help you out. And, we also have, within our program, we also have this wonderful module that can give you more strategies, but one of them is breathing strategies. So if we really take some time to just breathe, relax our muscles, our shoulders, bring it down, and just kind of breathe in, and then breathe out.
I feel relaxed already just hearing you talk about this.
Right. Just kind of stretch it out, move your hands, just something that, that really eases your mind. Make sure to do, you are important, because you also matter, so whatever it is that you do, exercise, talk to a friend, walk, read a book, do it because you're honoring yourself. Because you do matter.
Thanks. Great. Love to hear it. Just one last question. What additional, and I know you recommended, you were going to send us some links to I want to call them flashcards, because that's not the right term, and some of the other things that you mentioned. Is there any other recommended reading, websites, resources that you wanted to call out?
Yeah, I definitely will share that Pinterest link, but once you get on Pinterest, you can, oh my gosh, there's so much in there that if you haven't been on Pinterest, you might love it or hate it afterwards. I don't know. I love it. It gives you great ideas. But I also, we have those quick connection cards again available to you to be able to use. We do have that Harmony app where you can find those quick connection cards, so you'll have them on your phone. But it also has a relaxation station
Oh,
where
wow.
you can do these breathing strategies with your students as well. So take time for that. Um, and also for yourself, you can do these breathing strategies on your own. And then we also have on-demand modules. So again, just we have topics on coping with teacher stress, building relationships with students, basic proactive classroom management strategies, because that all ties in. And it gives you, strategies that you can use the very next day in the classroom. It's important for you to have that professional development as substitute teachers, and know what's in, and what you can do for yourself and for your students. And one thing that I wanted to touch base on too, we touched a little bit on it. Sometimes, we get into the mode of like, okay, I have these lesson plans, I have to get through these lesson plans, and that's it. No, take time for yourself. If you and your students need to take a breather, then do those breathing strategies together. If you as a group need to talk about something, maybe the highs and lows of the day, or something happened in the playground, then take that time to discuss those issues. Because then, that builds such a strong bond, and that can help with the academics later on.
Love that. Love that authenticity. That's really nice. Well, thank you. That was wonderful to hear. I loved it. I'm sure our audience loved it too. So just to let you guys know, in the audience, we're going to be sharing those links in the Help Center, and this time I'm going to text out instead of email you a link to the page where you can find those. Now, I think we're going to get to live Q&A. Just a reminder for the audience, be sure you put your questions in the Q&A window and not the chat window, because I don't have superpowers to manage both windows. But while we wait for some questions to roll in, looks like we already have some questions. There was something else I was going to tell you. What was it? Oh yeah, I was going to push out one more poll, and this is just a quick yes, no. Did you guys, that's not the right poll, hang on. Poll 2, did you get what you came for? Okay, so while people are answering that, wow, you guys are fast. Looks like yes, for the most part. That's great. If for some reason you did not see or hear what you wanted to hear, please drop that question in the chat, and we are going to get started with it. So I think you kind of addressed this at the beginning, but Vivian is asking, so we're talking about substitute teachers, not permanent ones. We only have a few hours. How can we build a positive relationship?
Yeah, great question. Again, starting off by going into the classroom and welcoming them, saying hi to them. Even if you're standing outside of the classroom and doing a little fist pump, or just kind of some type of hello greeting as they're coming into the classroom, it's a great way to start the day off. And then one of the first things that you can do is just kind of share something about yourself. Right? They always like to listen to that new person in the classroom. And maybe within that conversation, there's something that connects with the students, right? So that's something that you can do as well for that, building, relationship building.
So Anuradha wants to know, this is a great question. Some students don't even greet back. Is there something you can do when they don't respond to your greeting? That sounds like a high school class.
Oh my goodness. If I could tell you how many times I would say hola, because I was a Spanish teacher, and I would get crickets. Some students just won't respond, and you just let it be, as long as you're the one that greets them and you say something, then that's what it is, right? I used to stand outside of my classroom and I would greet my students and say, hola. And sometimes they were just like, oh my God, a word in Spanish. And they wouldn't say anything, right? But that's such a basic word. And I would continue saying it every day, and I still wouldn't get people to say it. And then finally they would start saying hi to me, and as substitute teachers, we may not have all that time. But if they don't say hi or not, just leave it. As long as you do something and you say something to them, that's what matters.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're talking about is just consistent behavior, and that will eventually kind of warm them up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mindy's got a question. I'm going to paraphrase here. Any tips for disruptive behavior in classrooms? Getting like a
Yeah.
little off topic, but I just want to know if you had something you could recommend.
No, yeah, absolutely. If there's disruptive behaviors, I would definitely pull that student aside and have a conversation to just find out what's going on with them. Sometimes, again, they're just trying to show off.
Mhm.
Sometimes they're doing it because they're seeking some type of attention. So just having that conversation with them would benefit both. Um, as well. I have also been in a situation where I've had a conversation and that may not help. But then if that's the case, then you definitely have to talk to or leave a note for the teacher, or possibly talk to someone within the department that can come in and address that, because really you're there to focus on all students again. And if there's that one person who is being disruptive and you've talked to them, you try to have that conversation, then someone else can come in and help you with that. Again, you're not alone, right? You have people around you that will help you.
You use your village.
Yep.
Brad has a great question. It's challenging enough to learn the names of 25 students, and now they're wearing face masks, and it's even more difficult. But any thoughts on that?
Well, it's funny because I had to learn my students' name, like their real name, and then they also picked out their Spanish names. So I had to memorize both. For me, a seating arrangement was what helped me at the beginning of the year. I don't know if that's something that is given to you by the teacher. Um, Having that seating arrangement just kind of allows me to, put, the location of the student and then their name. I also had, I don't know if you all have this, but you can also sometimes create a seating charts with the face of the students. And I get it now, they have masks, so you're only dealing with, with really eyes, and that's really hard. And unfortunately, I have not been in that situation because I haven't been in the classroom with a pandemic. But calling them by their name, like if they're asking a question, you look up your seating chart. And even if it takes you a little bit longer to kind of find them, but addressing them with their name helps, because now you're putting, the name and then part of their face, together.
Yeah. Margarita's got a question on activities for 8th to 9th grades, that specific age.
Activities for
8th and 9th graders.
Oh, like to get to know? Get to know one another? Activities. Okay, so we have what we call our everyday practices. And what we do is we have meet up and buddy up. And that may sound like that's an elementary level situation, but please, please know that middle school kids, high school kids, kids in the higher levels in elementary schools, at the end of the day, they're kids. They like to, share with each other. So what we do is meet up is pretty much essentially circle time. And this is a way that you can use those quick connection cards and ask a question and everyone go around and talk about it. There's a way at the beginning of this meetup to say a greeting, and everybody has to do some type of greeting that's the same, using each other's names. So that's great building within their peers. And then there's also, buddy ups, right? Where the students are buddying up with each other, but you can also be part of that. So you can rotate, and buddy up with a student, and get to know them and have these questions asked. So that's one way that you can do it. I also, bringing back old school, I like show and tell. So like bringing something that is meaningful to you, and then you share that with them, and then maybe have some volunteers do the same. And depending again if you're there, through a period of time, you can have different students share throughout the different days as well, so you're not spending like all this time on that. But that's something the kids enjoy as well. So, and again, this Pinterest has these beautiful like surveys where they can get into their artistic side as well, and also allows you to get to know them too.
We got a question here on tips on managing the relationship with the school's full-time teacher.
Okay. Well, can I get a little bit more context on that? Is it like they don't have
Yeah, well, it's typed in
communication?
the chat, but if I could guess, I would say I think maybe are there benefits to that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why earlier on I said if there's a way that you can communicate with the teacher via email, phone call, anything, or maybe even face to face, depending, why you're subbing.
Maybe asking for the seating chart so you don't struggle with the names.
Exactly. What are some ways that, if they don't, if they have a seating chart, if there are certain rules that, that are, must, or, and number one is really asking, like, is there anything that I need to know about your students or a student in the classroom, right? So that you can have a heads up on what you're walking into as well. So having that communication with the teacher is definitely important. And if you're one of those substitute teachers that maybe subs for that same teacher throughout the year, that's such a great collaboration that you both can do to help each other out. So definitely. And if I saw really quick on the chat, what happens when there's no sub plans left, right? I mean, communicating the importance of having some lesson plans, some sub plans there is important. Otherwise, then kids really do believe things like, oh, there's no work to be done, and that's not the case.
Yeah. That's a great question. I just did want to shout out that we are going to be having a speaker series on when there's no sub plans, and we also have several articles on our help center that talk about it. There are activity ideas that you can kind of put in your sub bag and bring with you if you should run into that situation. Yeah. And I know we're kind of running up on time, but I did want to pick up this last question. So this kind of touches on what you were talking about with some students might just be showing off. This attendee is asking, what do you do when students are doing things like raising hands and asking for silly things like Band-Aids that they don't need, constant bathroom requests, just doing kind of sounds like silly stuff to be disruptive. Do you have any tactics for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And they will, right? They'll ask to go to the bathroom, and they'll ask to do this and to do that. You know, it's really interesting, right? When that happens, if you kind of set the tone of what your day is going to look like with them, reading the sub plans, which you hopefully will have, and you keep the students busy, right? Then there's not going to be room for them to be raising their hand and doing silly stuff. So if you walk in and you do your introduction of yourself, you maybe get to know them, kids are not going to interrupt like when their peers are talking and everybody's engaged, because if everyone is engaged and you have that one person who is disrupting the class, the kids are also going to tell that one kid to stop it, right? Because they want to be part of this engagement, right? And then move on to the next thing that you have on those plans, right? Get right to work, and get the students to work, because once everyone is working, if you have those one or two or three kids who are misbehaving, you can pull them aside too while the other ones are working and doing what they need to do.
Great. Those are great solutions. Well, we are at time. This has been an absolute pleasure. I learned a ton. I know our audience learned a ton. Thank you so much for being here. And everyone, we will be sending out a text to our webpage where you can find links to these resources, and I encourage you to check them out. Thank you so much, Veronica.
You're very welcome. And I thank you very much for having me today. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. Bye-bye. See you at the next event in 2 weeks. Bye. Bye, Veronica.
Bye-bye.